good match. My hat went off to them. You knew there was going to be shenanigans after the match to soften Asuka up for Sasha. Asuka and Sasha was a good match too. It wasn't as good as the Raw match they had, but it was good. I didn't like in the championship match. I didn't like the fact that it was on a backslide. I didn't like that. Ooh. I didn't like that. I liked the fact that there was no finishers. That was different. Yeah. There was no max out on the finishers. That's cool. But the fact that it ended on a backslide, like I know me and Randy was talking about it, like I get it. It protects both guys, but it's just like
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. It is very contested. A good again, you can go to What Culture, you can go to Cultaholic, you can go to Solid Monster, wherever you get your wrestling recaps from. Wide variety of different reactions essentially. So you're down on the backslide, Kid Ty, People's Champ. What do you guys think?
On Orton winning
the finish backslide
on the finish.
Here's what I have to say about the finish. For anything, I was okay with it. Like at first when I saw it happen, I was like, really? But then again, I had to kind of sit back and think about it because, like, as wrestling fans, we bitch over everything, and unfortunately, we nitpick everything. Let's just call it a spade. And it's funny because before that event, like before the whole SummerSlam, I was watching the Jobber Tears podcast, and there was like about how certain things about booking, and like we literally bitch about everything, like even the most minute things we shouldn't really bitch about. As for that ending, after like I came to my senses, I was like, it wasn't bad because for one, no one had to hit their finishers in the match, like me and Biggie talked about in the group chat that night. No one had to there was no Claymore, there was no RKO. Both men were both protected. Like Drew said, like Drew said on Monday, he beat him with a wrestling move. It's a wrestling match for the WWE Championship, the biggest
title back to the Edge thing
of the company. So if we're talking about a wrestling match, Drew McIntyre beat Randy Orton with a wrestling move. No matter how simple it was a wrestling technique that was used to win the match. And I think at times as fans, we lose sight of, it has to finish like this, it has to be like this, it has to be like this. And sometimes we forget it's a wrestling show at times. Sure, WWE prides themselves on entertainment and moments. But every now and then, it's good to not see the finish you expect coming, hint, hint, in terms of having Drew win by an alternative way. It is a wrestling match. Sometimes, you're usually used to this. You're so used to the spectacle of that finish that you're expecting. And then this one time you get something that's completely different. And it's like, well, I don't like it. Well, after people come to their senses and kind of get themselves out their feelings for a little bit, you have to realize, okay, yes, the E in WWE stands for entertainment, but at the same time, the second W does represent wrestling. And it's a championship match, and these are two of the best going at it. And they're mirror images of each other in a sense, so it worked for that dynamic, which was why the match ended the way it did. So I'm not really mad.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Ty, what you thinking, man?
I agree with Randy, and I agree with Randy because I feel like professional wrestling, yes, everything in life for the most part is subjective. Everybody has their own opinions, right? But I think that professional wrestling at its core, people forget about a lot of the fundamentals. People forget a lot about what professional wrestling actually is and how many different approaches you can have to a match. Now, you can make the case that this match was done a certain way to build towards a rematch down the road. That's an easy case as to why the backslide was done, and that could open up the avenue for them to fight again. You can make the case that they were going for a dynamic where, like everyone mentioned, and I didn't even really notice it myself until it was brought up now, that they didn't hit their finishers. If anything, Orton teased his multiple times. Drew teased his maybe once or twice, and it ended all in a different manner than what you were expecting, which sadly fit the tagline of "you didn't see it coming." But it's professional wrestling. You can win off submissions. You can win. The name of the game is your shoulders have to be on the mat. You can win a wrestling match in 3 seconds. That's always been the name of the game. And I understand where people are coming from because in terms of the context, right? Like I said before, the Bailey and Sasha thing, how many times we've seen roll-ups and cheap victories. WWE is notorious for having a lot of victories that feel underwhelming, whether it be from roll-ups from heels, baby faces, cheap interferences, matches being interrupted, causing like a great match, like say Undertaker and Kurt Angle for the WWE Undisputed Championship in 2003 to end up with Brock Lesnar swinging chairs like a madman. You know, these things do happen. You know, they are very storyline oriented. But the thing is that this finish was appropriate for the moment. It was appropriate for the dynamic. And I think it's just the non-beneficiary of the context at the times. A lot of wrestling fans watch other products. They watch stuff like, especially, you know, when it comes to like Ring of Honor classics, New Japan in recent years, where a lot of wars end in this definitive fashion. Not every wrestling match has to end in a definitive fashion. Not every great match has to end by way of a finisher. I honestly sit here and say if it fits the scenario and it fits the dynamic, you have every right to do it. I mean, one of the best matches in WrestleMania history was Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle. It didn't end off a frog splash. It didn't end off an ankle lock. It didn't end off of an angle slam. It ended off a small package.
You know, and you know what, off of that, because you did mention like it doesn't have to be. I feel like a roll-up, given the storyline, is a definitive finish. Because you mentioned the biggest, like one of the best WrestleMania matches in your claim. Objectively, one of the best, if not the best, SummerSlam match, British Bulldog, Bret Hart, roll-up. You know? So there is something to be had about having said definitive finishes. And I think.
And what did they do down the road? They had rematches in later years where we got to see more of the dynamics you wanted to see. Do you really want to spend all your gas on one match and that's the only time they fight and that's the only thing you get? Or do you want to see more great matchups over time? You can't exhaust all your options.
And not for that, like there's another notch on top of that as well, because a lot of the things that we've been clamoring for recently is finishes. There's been a lot of false finishes. Would you rather, all right, you want to keep Randy Orton strong, you want to keep Drew McIntyre strong. Fair enough. Who wins, who loses, how do they lose? Do you want a false finish? Then you could run the risk of having those false finishes. Randy Orton has been in a lot of false finishes. The SmackDown Championship title, the male title, whether it's WWE or Universal, has been through a litany of false finishes throughout the course of its tenure. I could look back, the AJ Styles, although we praised Samoa Joe, the AJ Styles Samoa Joe rivalry flooded with false finishes.
AJ's first title win was off a low blow.
So a lot of those things kind of like you have to, find a way to basically strategically get things done. I guess it's like I to an extent I understand it because it was built up in a certain way that you would get a kind of a definitive fashion, and you could see the way where people kind of are baited and switched. But in the same token, they gave you something where down the line to Kid Ty and People's Champs point, they could give you more going on.